Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Joining me today, as always, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on X, or Twitter as we old folks call it. And
hey,
how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. And how are you, juror number 0?
Juror number 0. I was juror number 0. Hey, look, I mean, I was gold bricking yesterday. I wasn't really gold bricking. I was at the county courthouse, the local county courthouse, and I hadn't been called for jury duty in I think 18 years. It's either 17 or 18 years, and the last time was when I was in Minnesota. I've been in Texas for 2 years, and I got called for jury duty here. And
that's pretty quick, though.
Yeah, I mean it's
2
kind of
years.
a lot, right? Well, couple things. First off, this is not a large county. Okay. I think the county that I was in had a lot more population. I don't know what the actual numbers were, but I would guess it was probably about twice the population in Dakota County, Minnesota than there is in McLennan County, Texas. And I think that there's just probably more trials going on here for whatever reason. And so, I got the summons a few weeks ago, and I actually don't mind doing jury service because it's necessary, right? And if you're going to live under the rule of law, you should perform your civic duty every once in a great while when they ask you to, and show up for jury duty and act like, act like you are appreciative of living under the rule of law. That's so at any rate, I figured, and they were asking people as they're going in, can you serve all week? And I swear that 3 of the 4 people in front of me that I heard the answer to were saying, oh, well, I've got this or I've got that, right? So you asked me, and I said, yeah, I can be here all week. I would have gotten, I think there's 3 days a year for jury duty from my company. Then I can just take vacation days. That would have been fine for me. I wouldn't have minded that. And so they said, okay, great. So sends me in. And, you'll have to bring in your little filled out card, saying this is who I am and all this kind of stuff. So I fill out the card. I've already filled out the card, and I bring it in. I hand it to the guy. There are well over 300 people in this room.
Oh, my goodness.
It's packed. And I find out that there's 4 trials starting this week, right? 3 criminal trials and 1 civil trial. So they need 4 decent-sized jury panels so they can pick 12 jurors for each of these trials. So they're like somewhere between 45 and 65 people for each panel. And
wow.
So if you add that all up, it's around, they need about 180 people, I think is what it came out to, 180 or 190 people. And the clerk, who's a funny guy, clearly has to do this every Monday. So he's kind of worked on this. He's worked on his routine, and he's a pretty funny guy. And he says, well, look, he says, we've got over 300 people here. Actually, I think it was closer to 400. Then they asked, at the very beginning, they asked people, if you've got some sort of impediment, they list the impediments, and they say, if you've got some sort of impediment, or you need some sort of, or you think you've got a valid excuse for jury duty, come up now. We'll get you guys processed first. I'll tell you whether or not you got to serve, and then we'll go on. And he asked the rest of us to be patient. Take about half an hour to get through that part. I'm reading a book, right? And so when he gets to it, he says, look, we're going to need about 180 or 180 people, something like that. He says, there's over 300 people in the room now. He says, so about 40% of you are probably going to get off the hook. He says, the other 60%, I'm sorry, you're going to be sticking with us for a while. And, he's laughing, and people are joking around. He's joking around about this. And sure enough, they start drawing random for the 4 different panels. And my name never came up. And so at the end of that, they do the panels. He says, okay, everybody whose name wasn't called, please raise your hand. So I raised my hand with a bunch of other people. And he says, go out and buy a lottery ticket because today is your lucky day.
Wow.
Your jury service is over. You can go right out the door there, and the clerk there will work with you and finish off your jury service, and you're free to go. You don't need to come back.
So was he drawing paper with numbers or names?
I think that they were just drawing random cards out of the stack that they had.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
And so it wasn't by number because they didn't ask us to remember our number. I had actually memorized my number in case they were going to do that, but so it turns out they weren't doing it by number; they were doing it by name. So I think they were just drawing cards out one at a time for these things, and I was among the 40% that didn't get called. So, I earned a whopping $7.50.
Well, that's pretty good, Ed. For how many hours?
I don't know. I was there about 3 or 4 hours, and and they said, and I was just about to tell, I don't really need the 750. You guys keep it. And when we got out there, they said, you can't tell us to just keep it. We're cutting the checks no matter what, but you can tell us to send the check to a charity of your choice. We've got 6 qualified charities, most of which are victims funds. And so he says, but you got to fill the card out. You got to fill it out accurately. Otherwise, if the check shows up in your mailbox, you may as well cash it because we can't redo it. So I filled out the card and I checked off a victim's charity, and we'll see if I did it right. But if not, at $7.50 coming to me. I just,
Did you get my address right on the check, Ed?
I did. The Andrew
Malcolm Fund for Elderly Angry Journalists.
The Statler and Waldorf Fund.
Yeah, that's right.
For the Eminence Grease podcasters. That's what it was. But again, it's an interruption. It's kind of a pain. It's a little bit, it's not necessarily the thing that you want to do. But I was a little disappointed that I didn't get a chance to get through a voir dire session. I've never been selected and gone through voir dire. There's a couple of times where I got put on, where my panel was selected for voir dire, but it never took place. The one case, my panel was split in 2, and they picked the jury from the first half of the panel, so they sent me home. And the second time, it was going to be a 3-month trial. It was a civil trial. It's going to be a 3-month trial. Which at the time I was working for some place that I didn't really care much for. And I was thinking, this is going to be great because I'm going to make them pay me while I'm out for 3 months. And we show up in the morning of voir dire, and the judge shows up in the chamber because it was the clerk that was handling it. The judge actually shows up in the chamber. He says, I just want to let you people know that you've done a great job. You're basically heroes because when you showed up yesterday and this morning, both sides got serious about coming to a settlement, and they settled the case this morning while you were sitting in the room. And it's because you were here that they did that. So congratulations. Your jury duty is over. We're not going to make you sit for the panel. And I'm going, no, keep me on. Keep me on, please. So, yeah.
I don't know, Ed, with your checkered background, I don't think those lawyers would cancel you out.
Well, I mean, again, I said, even if I get to voir dire, I doubt that I'd actually ever be chosen for a jury because they're going to say, well, what do you do for a living? I say, I write about politics, the law, and court cases from my completely, my completely unschooled lay perspective. And I guess that they probably would fall over them. Both sides would probably fall over themselves trying to get me off that panel. So, just fine. If that's what happens.
Everybody in my family got picked, but I haven't been.
And it's. I mean, again, it doesn't bum me out that I didn't get picked, but I would have been fine being there all week and serving on a jury if I needed to.
Yeah.
So,
well,
maybe next time. Who knows?
You can hang in there, Ed.
So, what did I miss yesterday, Andrew? That's why I got you in here so I can ask you, what did I miss? Because I'll tell you, I wasn't paying a darn bit of attention to anything that was happening. I was enjoying myself reading my book, relaxing.
Oh, that's good for you. Actually, Ed, you didn't miss anything at all.
Oh, darn it.
Joe came back. Joe came back from his latest vacation, getting ready to go to India and Singapore, I think, again. I don't know. It's the week before Labor Day, but hang in there because on Friday he's starting another vacation for the holiday. So,
well, it's, some people need a vacation from their vacation. I think that
I know. Yeah. Yeah,
Joe Biden needs a
absolutely.
vacation from his vacation from his vacation from his vacation.
Those guys, like you said about the optics, there he was on the beach. Maui's burning up. And he said no comment. Now, later, the White House said, well, he didn't hear the question, which we speculated might have been the case.
Yes, we did.
But forget about no comment. Just pretending to tan himself on the beach with this old man bod under an umbrella while the Hawaii was burning. It's just a bad image, He could.
Well, this is the thing about politics these days. We were talking a little bit about this just beforehand, right? Which was this politics of engagement. And you've got a great story about a governor that you used to work for and how he remembered people and how he trained himself to do that. I mean, I have another one. I think I've told this one before about Norm Coleman, which apparently I thought it was going to be the first time I met him. It was actually the second time I'd met him. And he remembered the first time and he remembered my name. And I was like stunned.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And I talked to his aide afterwards and he goes, yeah, he's very good at that. And it's a really good skill to have in politics. He says,
oh my God,
really good at it. So you know this because you've seen it up close.
Yeah, I did. I'll just shorten the version, but I was working for the governor of Montana, who was a prosecutor for many, many years with a 96% conviction rate. So you want to settle before the trial. We were in a restaurant in Billings, Montana. The waitress comes up to take our order. The governor looks at her. Now, this is 1994. And the governor looks at her and says, we've met, haven't we? And the woman is startled. And she said, yes, we have. And he looks at her and he says, your name is Yvonne. And she nearly faints. And she said, yes, that's right. He said, we met in the Yellowstone County Courthouse, 1984. So 10 years later, he remembered her name. Now she is just beyond impressed. And she's going to tell everybody in her family, which is the power of names in politics. And he says, but I'm sorry, I don't know your last name. And she says, oh, that's okay. And he gets this twinkle in his eye and he says, but then they didn't tell us the last name of jurors, did they? It's just like Mike Mansfield, the longest serving Senate Majority Leader. He was ambassador in Japan. And I came to know him fairly well, even off the record. He was a great man, self-made man. And for some reason, he took a liking to us and my family and my daughter, who was adopted from Korea. And they came over for dinner just before we left Tokyo. The Mansfields did. And he was smitten with the girl. So this was probably 6 or 7 years later. She was just a little girl then.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been. Well, anyway, I forget the time schedule on it, but she was a little girl, and so I'm at the State Department. I'm working on the story, and the big kerfluffle, and they start clearing the doorway, and somebody important is coming. The car pulls up, and out gets Mike Mansfield. So I'm standing behind the rope line because I love the man. And he walks by and he looks over and he sees me and he stops the entourage and he walks over, shakes hands, and he says, oh, it's good to see you. Good to see you, Andy. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, how's that little girl of yours? She should be just about ready for college. And I said, yes, sir. She started last month. I mean,
yeah.
And now,
because politicians in that era, really up till fairly recently,
yeah,
really prioritized person-to-person contact. I mean,
it's a winner. It's a winner. It's such an obvious winner, and they even fake it. When they point out at the crowd, they're not pointing at anybody individually, but they'll put their hand in the crowd and move it, and then 10 people think they pointed at them. It's there's nothing wrong with it. It's how you get votes in our political system. And it touches people. It's like, remember the Mean Joe Green Coca-Cola ad?
Oh, yeah, that was a great ad, too.
Yeah, I know. It's the same sort of thing when athletic heroes stop to come over and talk to the Down syndrome kid or whatever. It's just it's a nice thing. And it's the proper use, in my mind, of fame.
Yes. Well, yeah. And again, that is, it's how you, politics about
use it.
Right. I mean, it's really the science, if you will, or the art of human connection. I mean, talk about this in my book. I was just about to say, gee, it'd be nice if somebody would write a book about this.
But wait, I can see it in the corner.
Yeah. But, Barack Obama was good at that. He built an organization that kind of did it in his stead, which when you're running for president is necessary because it's not like running for mayor. You can't go out and greet.
Although Chicago politics work that way.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, the machine does it magnificent, or they did. I don't know about today, but
I don't know that anybody does it magnificently today. And I don't know that it's valued. I mean, you take a look at the reaction to the debate, and you've got a great column up today. Well, not today, yesterday, I think, or maybe Sunday about the debate.
Yeah.
Now we'll certainly get into a little bit about what we thought of the debate itself, but look at the reaction to the debate. Now, I think that voters had a pretty good take on who won, who lost. And I say that because it more or less matched up with my own.
Well, obviously they're intelligent.
They're smart. They're obviously really smart about this, except that Ramaswamy came in second, and I thought he had a terrible debate, but that's a different topic. He was engaged though. Whereas some of the other ones weren't, and that matters in a debate. But some of the criticisms were on DeSantis, and to a certain extent, Nikki Haley too, who I both thought had a really good debate night, especially for first time out. Well, they were too stiff. Well, they didn't have anything. They didn't excite the crowd. Ramaswamy, of course, did in both directions. And I'm thinking to myself, and I tweeted about this later. It's like, who cares if they're stiff?
Yeah.
They're answering the questions correctly. Both of them, although I think DeSantis much more, referred back to their own records as governors. I think Haley didn't do it often enough. She really needs to work that in more. But DeSantis certainly did. Every single answer he gave was, look, this is what I did in Florida.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why it worked, and it's the reason why it connected with people. But people are saying, oh, he's too stiff. Oh, he doesn't have enough charisma. It's like, look, I'm not going to discount charisma. Charisma helps in politics. There's no doubt about that. But I'm not voting for entertainer chief. And
that's right. Exactly, Ed.
That is where this has been disconnected, right? Because it's one thing to have charisma, and I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to discount charisma, but it's not about those connections anymore. And when they talk about charisma, they're not talking about Mike Mansfield, and they're not talking about Norm Coleman having good one-on-one engagement, knowing who people are, giving a damn about what they give a damn about. They're talking about entertainment. They want somebody to entertain.
Exactly. Well, that's the price you pay for television. Okay. Television wasn't in politics until the 1952 national conventions, which were both in Chicago. And they were both held at the International Amphitheater because there was so much equipment that they just put it up in one place, and the parties agreed to go to the same place. And very, not quickly, but eventually, politicians figured it out. Remember that great picture of John Edwards combing his hair before a debate? It became TV debates became entertainment, and it became, the priorities were, how do you look? Not, do you have any substance? I've written about this. This is so revealing to me accidentally. The 1960 debate, I was already into politics, Ed. But I was in a smoky, noisy rec room in prep school. And there was only one television. And so I couldn't hear what they were saying. So I crouched down next to the TV. I didn't watch it. I heard it. And I came away saying, well, clearly Nixon schlockered Kennedy. I mean, there's just no way about it on substance. Having been vice president and a senator, and here's this new guy from Massachusetts. And the next day, the media was all full of, oh my God, Kennedy won. And the reason he won was because Nixon was sweating. He disdained makeup. He had a 5 o'clock shadow. He didn't look good. Well, the priorities get skewed by television, and you can see it now that with the college football started. You can see it. The cameras at the games during some timeout, the cameras will pan the stadium, and as the pan goes by all the spectators, they all react like the wave. This television turns them on to get on television. There's something magic about television that makes people do goofy things.
Yeah, it's called narcissism.
It's called what?
It's called narcissism, and I'm not immune to it either. I mean, there is. I mean, it's a look at me thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so these debates are not really. If you read the Lincoln Douglas debates, well, you'll fall asleep. But if you read the rough transcripts of the Lincoln Douglas debates in 1848, you see, or was it 58? Anyway, you will see. Yeah, it had to be 58 because the Republican Party hadn't started by 48. So you'll see. I mean, it's really boring. And I have, and we can play it sometime if you want. Right in this drawer, I have a disc of the earliest recordings of presidents, and you can hear their voices and their accents, and the way they talk is very grandiloquently, with clauses and so on. It's because they're talking to just maybe the first 50 people in front of them. There might be 5,000 people there. They can't hear anything. There's no loudspeakers. So it's now changed, and they have to talk in short bursts. We coach politicians. It used to be a 20-second soundbite. Now they're 8 seconds if you're lucky. So you got to have your message of the day, and you got to say it very succinctly. And hopefully the producer will pick that one out to show on the TV. So it's all about showbiz. And they talk about the ratings. 13 million people watched it. Ooh, wow. Like you said, the questions in the debates, okay, how do you, Mr. Senator, how do you propose to get world peace? You have 30 seconds. Well, I mean, let's get real. And then the buzzer goes off and the crowd starts to boo. I mean, it's got nothing to do with being president or judging the skills of being president.
So in your column, you take sort of an interesting approach to this, which is, and I think it's a smart approach, which is don't go for winners and losers. I mean, I think people help themselves, and I think people either didn't help themselves or hurt themselves in that debate. And I think one of the biggest winners of that debate is somebody who doesn't have a prayer of being the nominee, but who clearly was having a very good time on stage, and that was Chris Christie.
Oh, yeah.
He was the most relaxed, most comfortable in his own skin, pretty much, I call it, I think I called it in one post, the DGAF mode. Christie was in DGAF, which is don't give a fudge. Don't give a fudge mode. Yeah. But I think what you were landing on, something I was trying to get to as well when I did the next morning analysis of this, was to take a look at the strategies that each one of these employed and talk about how well it worked and, how it contrasted. That's something you do in your VIP post from Sunday. And on that basis, what did the debate tell you about where this race is going to go?
It told me that it's a long road for Ron DeSantis. It told me that Nikki Haley really knows her stuff. It told me that DeSwamy is dealing in catchphrases and see, he was on Hardball the other day, and he was asking him, well, who do you think I should vote for Democrat?
Oh yeah, that was from 2003. It was a
Yeah.
It was I mean, I had that in the headlines today. I saw it last night where he was 18 years old, I think, at a
yeah, so he's not, but Trump was a donor for Hillary Clinton, and had her to his wedding. It's these guys go back and forth, and I companies want to play both sides because they want to have access, and that's the way you get access is big donations. It works like a charm. So let's see, Chris Christie, like you said, he doesn't give a fudge. The others, I see Suarez. He wasn't on the debate, but he's already dropped out. I think maybe on the next debate, Burgum and Hutchison won't make the cut. We'll see. So
yeah, neither one of them really. I mean, I thought Burgum had a couple of nice moments early on, but I think he ran out of gas, and it might be related to the fact that he injured his leg the day before.
Yeah,
in pain. I felt bad for the guy, but while he was in the mix in the first hour, I was actually a little impressed with him. I thought he was.
No, he is. Yeah, he's like Americans. I mean, especially Republicans, they like executives, whether they're business executives or state chief executives, governors, and whatever. Democrats, they kind of go for the maneuvering legislators. And I think every Democrat ticket since 1928 has had a senator or a congressman as the vice presidential candidate. And if you go through the list, except for what was his Dukakis, they kind of go for senators. Remember?
Yeah.
Mondale.
I think he was the last one who was a non-senator, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Gore was vice president, but he was
senator. he was coming off vice president. They don't have.
Biden was vice president, but he was a senator for decades prior.
Right.
Yeah, right. They're very Washington centric, I think is a good way of putting it.
Yeah, they are. And to me, that's kind of boring and suspicious because it's kind of the in crowd. I like governors who've actually done things, and governors are much closer to the state, to the voters in their states than representatives are. And at one point, it wasn't just so long ago, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 34 of the 50 governors were Republicans. Republicans usually do very well at the state level. So DeSantis and Texas and all those places are Tennessee. So there, but I was taken with that Trump's strategy. He wasn't at the debate, but his strategy clearly is that he's the hare in the tortoise and the hare race, and he can take a night off and maybe all the debate nights off, because we know him. And the truth is, if you don't know Trump, then you don't deserve to vote. I mean, he kind of dominates the media, and I think it's refreshing to have the other candidates get a little oxygen in the race, and people can see what they stand for and how they behave. Once again, we get back to appearances, but how they act under the pressure and the lights.
Well, I don't think that behavior is appearances, right? I mean, I think behavior is, to a certain extent, substantive. I mean, it's one thing to have good hair. It's clearly, I'm never president. I will never be president. I mean, I think Eisenhower was the last bald president we had anyway. But I mean, and that was just because he was such a massively respected person after World War II, right? I mean,
right.
But to me,
now, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To me, behavior at least relates to substance. And that's one of the reasons why Trump is such a problem, right? It's because his behavior is childish. It's continuously childish. I mean, the name calling, the denigration of people just simply because they disagree with him. I mean, it's really playground stuff, and but it's popular. So Ramaswamy tried that and ended up getting his ears boxed by Nikki Haley, especially. But and Nikki Haley did a good job of.
She did, yeah, she did.
But Chris Christie was the first guy who really nailed him on the chin by calling him the Chat GPT candidate, because all he was doing is regurgitating these really, sort of silly, ambiguous talking points. He wasn't really explaining his strategy. He certainly doesn't have any experience to talk about these things, other than just calling everybody else on the stage sellouts and saying, I'm the only person here who's
right.
And I thought that was the line of the night, frankly. That, and for Christie, I get the UFO question? Is it because I'm from New Jersey? That was pretty funny. And then Mike Pence had a good laugh line too, which was, they were talking about cognitive tests for president. And they asked Mike Pence the question. I think it went to somebody else beforehand, and somebody gave a serious answer. It was like, no, I just trust voters. Voters should be able to determine who's, compos mentis enough to handle the office. And they asked Mike Pence, and Mike Pence says, well, actually, I think everybody in Washington should be forced to take which was actually his best moment of the night, because he was kind of weird, right? I want to talk about Mike Pence's strategy with you.
Yeah.
He was, on one hand, Mike Pence has this habit of sort of becoming a preacher on stage. And it's more genuine for him than it was for Ted Cruz 8 years ago, because it drove everybody nuts about Ted Cruz. It's a little bit more genuine for Mike Pence, but it's also really kind of sanctimonious. I know that's on DeSantis, but it's kind of sanctimonious. Well, I know that I was reflecting. Mike, he's a more genuine guy than that. He's actually a genuine, likable guy. And if he would just be himself a little bit more often, I think he'd do better. But then he turned into mean Mike Pence by starting the fight with Ramaswamy. Because I went back and checked the transcript, and he's the one who started that fight by saying, let me explain this to you, and I'll use small words so you can... Where did mean Mike Pence come from?
Well, yeah, but but you got to show a little spark, a little spunk. Yes. You got to be willing to fight for it.
Well, I mean, you expect that from Chris Christie, right? Because that's kind of his.
Yeah, that's right.
He doesn't do it the way Trump does it. He usually tries to keep it fairly professional, right? He's just pugnacious. He's not a grade school.
He's New Jersey, yeah.
New Jersey. And Trump is Queens. I mean, that's part of the.
That's right.
Trump is Queens. I mean, that's kind of the authentic Queens sort of thing.
Yeah.
Pence is not Queens. Pence is not Brooklyn. Pence is not the Bronx. Pence is Indiana. Okay.
That's right.
And it just didn't suit him well. And you can have a spark without being insulting. At least you used to be able to.
Yeah, you used to, but it takes some cleverness, takes some imagination, and it takes a willingness to risk something rhetorically. And they don't all have it, and that speaks to their confidence and their personality. And people, I think, should factor that in. Debates have become disappointing, but I
actually thought that this wasn't too bad. It had all the same flaws, right? Too short a time period, too much personal invective, mostly around Ramaswamy. But I, like you, thought that this was actually a pretty good look at how the strategies are going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that...
And it speaks, for instance, it's a long road for Ron DeSantis.
I think it's a longer road for Haley, but yes. I mean, I think it's long.
But she's she's argumentative, and she's got some foreign policy experience, and she went after Ramaswamy on that, and shows your naivete, and it's not good. DeSantis, he's got to make people aware nationally of what Floridians know intuitively about his individual day-to-day accomplishments as governor, which are many, and his attitude, his conservative bona fides, and you don't do that with an ad. You can help, but so that's going to take a while. He's got, I think, until the holidays to let people, to be in so many positions to let people see and hear his accomplishments and who he is. They already know Trump. They're coming to know Haley. So it's up to DeSantis to convince people to, and that's tricky. I did this with my governor when I was working with him in Montana. We set up an endless series of opportunities for the world to see you in a good light. Okay. Every month, my governor, he went to a what do you call it, Head Start program, and he would read like a story time. And there was one picture that he's sitting on the floor, the governor of Montana, on the floor reading, and he's got 2 or 3 kids in his lap and looking over his shoulder at the book. And there's one kid giving him a wet willy in the ear. But he's not distracted at all. He's really focused on the reading part. And his pant leg was up so you could see above his socks. And there was a photographer there from the Billings Gazette. And I said, gee, is that a picture? And the guy goes, oh, yeah. And he took a picture. And it was on the front page of the Billings Gazette the next day of the governor being a dad. And the chief of staff came in the next morning. She said, were you responsible for that awful picture on the front of the Billings Gazette? I said, well, no, that was their photographer took the picture. I mean, what do you think? I can't tell the media what to do. I can suggest it. And she said, well, this just was so ungovernmental. Now, she didn't have children, so she didn't expect or didn't, I think, appreciate the dad side of the picture. So she left, and I immediately called up, and I called the Associated Press, and I said, did you see the Gazette picture of the governor sitting on the floor? And they said, no, really? We'll get it. And they sent it out. And, of course, every paper in Montana ran the picture because it's a good picture, and it speaks, and it's genuine. It spoke to who he was, right? I mean, he had a costume for every Halloween. He came out, and we made that an element of mystery. Who will the governor be in his costume this Halloween? And kids started out with 200 or 300, but by the second year, we had thousands of kids coming for candy at the governor's house on Halloween because he's a dad, and he got a kick out of it. And he had he had 5 kids. So anyway, but that's the importance of appearance these days, and I think a lot of it has to do with television.
Yeah, I have to correct something I said earlier, and this is important.
Okay, Ed.
All right, here we go. This is important. I said that Mike Pence wasn't authentically Indianan in that moment, right? It was more like him trying to be Queens, him trying to be Brooklyn. Well, I've been corrected on that. The Messenger reports on an Indiana man who is charged with attempted murder after he allegedly attacked a coworker with a hammer at a sheet metal factory, reportedly displaying total apathy for the incident when asked about it on the way out the door. Witnesses said that August 20th, Austin Hahn, 27, walked up to a coworker from behind and swung a hammer at him multiple times. Hahn's other colleagues claimed that he then calmly disposed of the hammer before exiting into the parking lot. Maintenance workers said that Hahn tapped him on the chest and said, "Shit happens." Fortunately, the coworker survived, but had several skull. And he's on. He's been arrested for attempted murder, but I take it back, Mike. You might have been authentically Indianan, and then
yeah, that's right. It's a tough crowd there in Indiana.
It is rough, man. You know, that's maybe that's more Gary, Indiana-ish.
That's the central time zone. That's not the eastern part of Indiana.
It's up on the.
You know who else was from Indiana? Who else was from Indiana? Wendell Willkie. Remember him?
Yes.
1940. Talk about non-politician. He was chief executive of a big power company, and Roosevelt defeated him. But he was a really good candidate. Interesting guy.
By the way, that took place in Indianapolis. So and obviously.
Oh well, yeah.
There are weird people everywhere, but
blame that on Tony Katz. Yeah.
Which reminds me, I got to call Tony. I gotta talk to Tony sometime this week. So it's a good reminder for me to make sure.
Okay, well, that's what I try to do, Ed. I try to be helpful for all of our listeners, including you.
Well, I appreciate that. And by the way, we're just about out of time, but it's time for the jokes of the day. Do you have any good jokes?
I have a couple. These are all old. Conan O'Brien, he said, John McCain says people are so angry about America's future, he sees a revolution coming. McCain says he had the same feeling in 1776. Yeah. Seth Meyers, he said, Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang has qualified for the next two Democratic primary debates, while another Democrat candidate, John Delaney, has qualified to save 15% on his car insurance.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right, I got a couple for you here.
Okay, Ed.
Gotta give credit to jokesoftheday.net. Once again, a couple of them from there today. A guy and a girl meet at a bar. They get along so well, they decided to go back to the girl's place, and they have a few drinks. He takes off his shirt and washes his hands. Then he takes off his trousers and washes his hands. Then he takes off the rest of his clothes and washes his hands. And the girl says, "Wow, you must be a dentist." He says, "Yeah, how'd you figure that out?" She said, "Well, you keep washing your hands." So after that, one thing leads to another, and they make love. And after they're done, she says, "Wow, you must be a good dentist." And the guy says, "Well, sure, I'm a good dentist. How did you figure that out?" And she says, "Well, I didn't feel a thing."
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, that's ouch. All right. Another one, only a little bit cleaner. The first day of school, all the children bring, gifts for their teacher. Florist's son brought teacher a bouquet of flowers. Candy store owner's daughter gives the teacher a big box of candy. The liquor store owner's son brought up a big, heavy box. The teacher lifted it up and noticed that it was leaking a little bit from the bottom. She touched a drop of the liquid with her finger and tasted it. And she goes, "Is it wine?" And he goes, "No." She goes, "Well, is it champagne?" He goes, "No, it's a puppy."
Oh.
All right. Well, that just about wraps it up for this week's episode of Statler and Waldorf.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think it's a good time to wrap up.
I think on that one, I think that was a pretty good one to wrap up on. All right. Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com. You can find him on Twitter, not X. At AH Malcolm. And you can also just go to redstate.com and you can find out all of his great VIP contributions over there. Andrew, have yourself a great week. We'll get together after Labor Day for the next episode.
Yeah. I'll see you then. Thanks, everybody. Have a good long weekend.
You absolutely.